Hey photographers, this is the Sony ZV-E10. Today, I'm going to show you what I love and hate about this model. My reviewer sample came with the SELP 16 to 50mm motorized zoom lens. More about that later. Lenses are interchangeable to any of the large selection of E-mount lenses available from Sony and third parties. Love that. Sony's marketing materials stress that this camera is designed for vlogging. Of course, it's much more than that, both for stills and video. I love the versatility that you get in this small and affordable package. ZV-E10, I don't love or hate the name, it's just confusing. Size, design, sensor really suggests it's part of the A6000 series that I love. This review concentrates mainly on video. Stills features are pretty much the same as other recent Sony A6000 series models. What the A10 doesn't have is a viewfinder. For video, I don't hate that, but it does reduce its flexibility slightly. If you're coming from a phone, not an issue. But the missing viewfinder is offset by good in-camera stabilization, I'll demonstrate that later, and the super bright sunny weather mode on the LCD screen, both in the love column. Now, I love the screen. It rotates out to face forward for vlogging, swiveling up for low angles, and down for overhead shots. But I hate that the ports, mic, headphone, HDMI, are all on the swivel side. Odd, actually, as there are no ports at all on the other side. Opening the port cover also limits rotation. If you're the vertical type, that's easy. I do love that there are both mic and headphone ports. And I love the included windscreen that slips onto the flash shoe. I'll demo that later too. Along with the better than average internal mic. Now, the controls are all on the right side. I love the right side menu key. That really simplifies operation, unless you're left-handed. Now, I'm not a fan of the combination rotating and pressing control dial, which sometimes activates unintentionally. And there's no mode dial. There's a button that switches between video, stills, or S&Q mode. That's short for slow and quick, which creates slow motion and time lapses. I'm not going to call that yet. Might just take a little getting used to. It does make getting to scene modes and panorama a little more complicated. Vloggers won't notice. Also reserving judgment on the power on-off slider on the top. And I hate the unnecessary duplication of the shutter release and video record keys. In stills mode, they both work. One takes stills, the other starts recording video. In video mode, the stills key, instead of taking a still, pops an error message. The stills key can be customized, so it also starts recording video, but why can't I take stills in video mode? Other Sony cameras have that feature, even while recording video. Why not here? Now, the backside dial operates very smoothly, and by default, in manual exposure video mode, it sets the aperture. Love. Also love that on a camera this small, the battery and the card slot stay out of the way of a tripod quick release plate. Would have loved the battery more if they'd included the new larger battery instead of the classic FW50. Still, it provides over 80 minutes of record time on a charge. And although the body's lens mount is very low, the 10 to 18mm wide angle clears the plate. Now, I've always hated the backwards insertion for an SD card. It really makes it difficult to remove the card. And inside is the same 24 megapixel APS-C sensor found on the A6600. Love the value. And I love the vlogging specific features like soft skin effect. And there's a key on top that defocuses the background. The defocus icon replaces the aperture display. White is off, orange is on, and will help me demonstrate. I'll press the key to turn it on. While there is a change in exposure, and there is a difference, it's limited by the lens. In this case, Anne is close and the background is far away, so it's already pretty defocused. Now it's off again. I tried it both in low light and sunny conditions with a background that's close and far. The effect is usually visible, but the difference is minor, maybe because my shutter duration is manually set at 1/60th. But look quickly to see that it's not the most reliable feature. I start recording with it on, a few seconds later it resets. Maybe it's me, but for this scene, I'm close to the background and I'm further away from the lens. I'm zoomed in with an aperture at f5.6. There's very little effect on or off. So if you don't already understand how to create the right situation for background defocus, you might hate this feature. Background defocus also resets when the E10 is powered off or press the mode button. Now, this scene is a good vlogging on a tripod sample. I've also posted a video with best vlogging settings, link in the description. And although this video is output at 4K 30, the original recording of this scene is HD 30, 50 megabits. Face detect and eye detect make an occasional appearance, but regardless, focus stays with me. There's also a product showcase key, which overrides face detect to focus on closer subjects. I love the idea, but somehow it's unnecessary with this camera. Again, Anne provides a better example when I bring the Chroma selfie to the closest focus distance. I love fast. Now I'm going to throw blanket love all over Sony's focus. It's super fast with killer flexibility. With this lens, focus is as close as 25 centimeters. When you want to do a close-up while recording, with that super fast transition, love with an exclamation mark. And that's without the product showcase setting. From animal face detect to subject tracking, no one beats Sony on focus. This is nearly identical to their best cameras. When you want to track a subject, just touch to enable tracking. With the large focusing area and hundreds of focus points, everything from Anne to a moving Brio train is trackable. However, the E10's touch is limited to a few focus features. For instance, when the screen is rotated forward, touch would be an ideal menu and fun menu navigation. So I hate that that's not possible here. I love the color options. Even though the basic set of color profiles presets is limited, they can be modified by adjusting contrast, saturation, and sharpness, or selecting black and white. For more dramatic images, I love that many of the picture effects work in video. Settings like pop color, retro, and partial color add variety to your scenes. And then picture profiles. Image control with breadth and depth not available elsewhere, other than pro cameras. You can tap into the gamma settings to access alternate contrast response curves, alternate color modes, and dive deep into the sharpening settings using the detail section. But without the higher bandwidth of an external recorder, using gamma settings like S-Log may provide less than stellar results. However, HLG, hybrid log gamma, records using a profile that displays properly both on standard dynamic range sets and newer sets with extended dynamic range. So now that I have an HLG-capable TV set, love that. Also love that Sony provides a website, Help for Creators, that explains more of this pro-level feature. I loved the new firmware design and organization introduced with the A7S III, so hate that it has not been implemented here. Now, I don't hate the menu system, but there are operational faults and design issues that have not been addressed in over 5 years, making this camera feel kind of dated, and with all the added features, a little disorganized. For video, I hate the unnecessary NTSC PAL switch. Most cameras provide 25 and 50 without switching. And these old file formats. XAVCS has always been confusing. finding files on the card is a particular irritation. And while 100 megabits per second is fine for vlogging and YouTube, it doesn't serve this camera's other advanced video features. And I'm starting to hate cameras that don't keep video and still settings independent, although there are some excellent workarounds here that I do love, like the custom setting recall on the exposure mode selection. But hate that there's only one on-camera set. I love the third mode, S&Q, which enables both time-lapse and slow motion. So yeah, there are limitations. Labeling is confusing. But you can go from a 1 frame per second 60 times time-lapse to 120 frame 5 times slow motion, all created in camera. Did I already say I love that? Very useful for your videos. That's in addition to the 120 frame HD mode, which slows in post and records audio. Love. Stills mode has interval time rates slower than 1 per second and more options. And although you'll have to produce the video yourself from the stills, that's in the love column. So S&Q is simple, but this is powerful. Well, let's get to some of those demos. I don't love crops, but appreciate that they're necessary to make the math required for sensor resolution to match HD or 4K video simpler, resulting in higher quality images. HD frame rates show the same size image as 16:9 still, what the menu calls Super 35. 120 crops in. Although there's no crop for Steady Shot in HD, Steady Shot Active crops in. 4K at 24 frames is the same as HD, but 4K at 30 frame crops in. This is 4K 24 with Steady Shot Active and 4K 30 with Steady Shot Active. I make that about a 40% crop. So are these Steady Shot Active crops worth it? This is my usually shaky handheld shot. Steady Shot is off. And now with Steady Shot on, it's better, making a static shot fairly usable. And with Steady Shot Active, the movement is nicely smoothed out. Panning shot's also nice and smooth, but there is an occasional hop. The real Steady Shot test is, of course, vlogging while walking. Between continuous face detect focus and Steady Shot Active, what do you think? On this bridge. Let's put the windscreen. Now, the onboard mic here is superior to the mic found on most cameras, but I'd still recommend an external mic, mostly because you can put it in the best position for audio. And except for this scene, I've used external mics for this video. The 16 to 50 millimeter power zoom lens is small and light, and pairs nicely with this camera, but with the crops from 4K 30 and Steady Shot Active, 16mm is a little close for vlogging, so I'm using a selfie stick. The zoom lever and the slide on the lens change the focal length, which is indicated on screen. And there's a ring for manual focus. The 40.5 diameter filter mount isn't the most popular size for ND, because here with ISO 100 and shutter 160, the aperture is f/22. It is an optically stabilized lens, and while f3.5 is available at 16mm, ramps to f5.6 at 50. My love for this lens isn't unqualified. There certainly are better lenses available. As long as we're set up to vlog, let's try the light of a single candle. Now, even with the ISO at 32,000 and the shutter duration lengthened to 1/30th, the f5.6 from this lens doesn't really provide a usable image. As I said, there are lots of third-party lenses available with wider apertures that may provide better results. So let's try my 35mm f1.8. Yes, that's better. With f1.8 I can restore the shutter to 1/60th, back the ISO to 12,800. I was able to capture a custom white balance 3000K with a slight green offset. You see it over there. This looks natural while still keeping the feel of candlelight. Now, the menu is full of small things that, if you can find them and figure them out, provide features you won't find elsewhere. Like video file naming that includes the date. Love. Aspect ratios like 16:9 if you're using stills for time-lapse, and square for the social media apps that prefer that aspect. Speaking of which, I love the Send to Smartphone key for transferring images using the Sony Imaging Edge app. But old frustrations remain. HD's maximum bitrate is 50 megabits. In 2021, that should be at least 100, although, as I demonstrated in my best video settings video, the quality is good. Connecting an external monitor to HDMI remains confusing and messy, and it disables the touch feature. I'll spare you the long list, assuming that it's not a vlogger's issue, but other manufacturers get this right. I love that there's no 30-minute recording limit. You can keep recording until your SD card is full. And I love that battery life isn't much of an issue either. The E10 can be powered and recharged from USB. So that leaves overheating as the only possible downer on recording length. First rule of small cameras: they overheat quickly. There is the auto power off temperature setting with a warning. But in 4K at 100 megabits, using a 64 gig card and a fully charged battery while recording at 30 degrees Celsius, which would be the first casualty? This screen is recorded with a camera. That's one of the HDMI issues. It can't output the overlay screen in 4K. Impressively, the E10 sailed through the first 30 minutes without displaying the overheating icon. The icon appeared after about 40 minutes. The camera kept right on recording. Past 60 minutes, until the battery warning appeared after 77 minutes, with only about 6 minutes of card space left. 5 minutes later, just before 83 minutes total uninterrupted recording time, it was overheating that dropped the ball first, but the battery was nearly exhausted and the card was just about full. It's not ideal. There are cameras that do better, but for a small camera, I love that. However, hated that the overheating icon had me worrying unnecessarily for over 40 minutes. If your vlogging includes streaming, download Sony's free Imaging Edge webcam software. Now, you'll want a longer USB cable than the one included with the E10, but that will give you better control over your image exposure, white balance framing, than using the camera in your computer, and I love that. I'm not really a vlogger, but to me, this seems like a nearly perfect vlogging camera, particularly if you pair it with a slightly wider lens. 16mm is a little close on an APS-C sensor, well, for my complexion anyway, even with soft skin effect on. Screen swivels front with only minor obstructions, good internal mic, external mic in, headphone out to check your recordings, good stabilization, excellent autofocus, lots of image controls, time-lapse, slow motion, HD and 4K. My biggest ask? Touch menu operation, so I don't have to swivel back to change settings. For vloggers, this is a camera I am happy to recommend. Although this camera was on loan from Sony Canada, they did not compensate me in any way. They did not review or approve this video. I'm not sponsored by any manufacturer or service, so I don't stop in the middle to promote some product or service, nor do I allow YouTube to interrupt my videos with mid-roll ads. You are my sponsors, viewers and subscribers who've decided to become members. If membership is for you, please use the join button below. But subscribers need not worry. No content will be behind a paywall. And I do read and reply to all relevant and civil comments and questions. Thank you for watching. Stay safe.